Okay, oh, by the way, you'll have to excuse my phrase. It's humid here in Montreal. Hi, I'm Oliver. Welcome to today's book discussion. Today I'm going to be talking about Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. Now, in the words of Closedale talking about the downward dog, this book is war. You hear me? War, war. A challenge of every instant. Okay? I like to write when I start and finish a book. I started it on April 28th and I finished it on June 24th. Took me 2 months. For this, 2 months. 2 months, come on. Okay. So let's just start with the beginning. Why did I choose this book? So I chose this book because everybody used to talk about it. I remember when it came out, people talked about it, and you know, when you go to chapters and stuff like that, they have sections of book recommended by the people who work there. So this was one of the books recommended. It was a finalist for the Men Booker Prize. You know, like, okay, I'm in. And what finally pushed me into buying the book was the fact that it's being shot and turned into a movie. It's supposed to come out in the fall, maybe Christmas time. The book is broken down into 6 individual short stories. So to have 2 directors, 2 group of directors, I would say, is a good idea for that. So, in a nutshell, like Cloud Atlas would be like a... Okay, I'm gonna read the back, so I kind of sums it up as quickly or briefly as possible. Cloud Atlas reveals how disparate people connect, how their fates intertwine, and how their souls drift across time like clouds across the sky. Okay, so that's in a nutshell. So it's basically 6 stories with in each of those stories an individual who would appear, and this is what the author wants to have us believe, that all those people share the same soul. We're meant to think that because in every story one of the character has a birthmark in the shape of a comet. Okay, and the book is divided into 11 chapters. I'm gonna have a graph, by the way, so here's a graph. Now, the structure or the skeleton of this book is mind-blowing to me. So, on a technical point of view, I'm amazed. So, each stories use or at least the means of the narrative varies sometimes from chapter to chapter. So for example, the first chapter is you read a diary or a log from like a captain of a ship, a log. The second chapter is with letters, so you're seeing letters exchanged between people. The third and the fourth chapter is roughly a regular narrative. The fifth story is an interview, which I loved a lot. I was very intrigued. You just read an interview between 2 people. It was great. And then the 6th story is a regular good old narrative. Now, it's a science fiction book because it uses it uses the fact that it tells a story set in a different time to tell something about today's society. Right, science fiction is not just about being set in the future. It needs to be a social commentary or something like that. But that's not all of the book. 2 of the stories are set in the past. 2 of the stories, I would say, are fairly contemporary, and then 2 stories are set in the future. Now, if you know in terms of vocabulary or the orograph, the words and stuff like that, it's accurate in terms of stories set in the past. So if you used to read old-timey book, you should have no problem. Obviously, no problem reading contemporary stories. The challenge comes from the futuristic set stories. So there is one, so the fifth story, which is the interview. It's quite easy. It's, by the way, I'm a linguist, okay? That's my academic training. I love linguistics. Linguistics is the scientific study of language, and it's not about speaking language. It's about looking at what common throughout languages. It's also about reconstructing, dead languages or stuff like that. So I was impressed with his work. Didn't mean that I liked it, or enjoyed it, or found it easy. So the first story, though, is still easy and very enjoyable. So it's not that far into the future, so, cyborgs arrived, or, human-like robots arrived, so maybe, 100 or 200 years in the future. And the language the changes are quite subtle. So some brands have become nouns. Like Kleenex is not only a brand, but it's also now a everyday object. So in that case, Nikes and Sonys. You don't talk about shoes. You say, I wear my Nikes, and you watch a Sony, stuff like that. And there's a couple of syncopes, so parts of word that were just dropped out because they fell out of usage, and sometimes it reflects into the orthographic convention. So in the case of the book, for example, the E's, when it comes to EX, a word, E at the beginning of a word that starts with EX, for example, exactly or example, are now written simply with an X, no EX. So I was like, okay, that's fine, I can deal with that. Now, when it comes to the stories set into the very distant future, so the sixth chapter, war, there's, English is not my first language, French is. I feel bilingual. I feel fluidly bilingual, completely bilingual, and then something like this happens, and then I'm reminded, oh, I'm a frog. So if you read like the Canterbury Tales, or like an old edition of Beowulf, which I have had to in some world literature classes, then beware, be prepared about this story. So I mean, from a academics point of view, I'm amazed by the sixth story. I truly, genuinely am. I can't believe that he took the effort to, quote, invent a futuristic language, because I mean, it still does feel totally probable. It's fine. I'm gonna now try to insert a second slide, giving an idea of what the language is in the six stories. In terms of characters, the characters are fairly all engaging. Like the first chapter starts with a guy, a missionary on a settling in New Zealand, trying to convert the, quote, savages, and then the second chapter is about a guy running from his creditors, an English guy running from his creditors, finding shelter in Belgium and becoming a study aid of a great classical music writer, composer. The third chapter is about a journalist who uncovers a nuclear threat to the world. The fourth story is about a guy who wants to publish a story about the journalist who uncovered that nuclear threat. The fifth story is about the first cyborg who appears to have gained a soul and who decides to live a free life And then the sixth story takes place in a futuristic world after an apocalypse arrived of some sort, and it's just a small bundle of population trying to start civilization anew. And then you have very, very, very thin interconnection in between those stories. So for example, the first story, as I told you, was a guy who was writing a diary or a log. Well, in the second story, the guy in his bedroom is like, oh, by the way, there's a book on my bookshelves that is the diary of a guy. And that's it. That's it. I mean, the fifth and the sixth story seems to have a clear interconnection that doesn't seem superficial. So the fifth story is about this cyborg, and in the sixth story, this cyborg is considered to be a divine or godlike creature. So that this did not feel weak to me. And at the end of the sixth story, they discovered that actually this things that they've been worshipping was not a godlike creature, but turns out a very human, mortal cyborg. So I mean, this was okay. I'm in. But yeah, all those other connection, I mean, quite weak. And the second story is about a guy who creates a music that's about he creates music, and it's about 6 instruments playing different melodies that sometimes intertwines and overimpose themselves over one another to create a harmonious melody, which is a metaphor of the book, obviously. So yeah. For the fact that it took me 2 months to read this book, for the fact that it is challenging to read, not by its content, but by its structure. I mean, the vocabulary of that sixth story is unbearable. And for the fact that it fails to tell something greater than what I thought it would, I was disappointed in this book. Because that's what this book is to me, a lot like a gimmicky maybe. And one of the character in the book, you know, the music composer who is telling him, who is composing those 6 melody that sometimes intertwine, he's like, is it just gimmicky? Kinda is. So yeah, I finished. I still felt, you know, that I had achieved quite a feat when I felt I had accomplished something, and I was very proud of myself for finishing this book. But yeah, challenging, a bit dry at times. Story does not pay off as much as I hoped it would. But yeah. Leave comments below if you've read this book. Do you think that what I told you will influence you to not read this book, or actually are you just inclined to trying to prove me wrong and read this book and think you might like it? Leave comments below. If you make a video response of this video, don't forget to post it below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Check me out on Twitter and Facebook. This is where I should be updating from a lot from now on. I haven't been updating a lot lately because I was stuck on this journey. So this is behind me. So I'm back on track. I'm back on track. So there you go. Looking forward to read your comments, suggestion. So have a good day. Bye.